From slaughtering every woman, man, and children in Jericho, to completely wiping out the Amalekites and burning their cities to the ground, these are some of the instances where genocide or mass killings were recorded in the Bible. And what better way to start than the one orchestrated by God Himself? At 600 years old, Noah had spent a huge part of his life preparing for a flood no one else believed was coming. He dedicated the past 100 to 120 years building this strange ark that God told him to make, adding enough space to hold his entire family, plus 2 of every single animal on earth. Everyone thought he was crazy, but Noah knew no one could survive what was coming. After God confided in him in Genesis chapter 6 about how much he regretted making man and how he planned to destroy them along with the earth itself, Noah took to the streets to warn everyone about the horrors God was about to unleash on the world, giving them a chance to save themselves by getting on the ark with him. But nobody really listened, and by the time the flood came, it was too late. For 40 days and 40 nights, the entire planet was battered by endless rain, wiping out every living being that wasn't on the ark, making this the most widespread mass killing in the history of the Bible since it touched the whole earth. According to God, this was the only appropriate punishment for a world so corrupted by evil. While the Bible doesn't mention how many people lost their lives during the Great Flood, historians believe the figure was around 1 to 8 billion. However, that wasn't the last time God personally oversaw the complete wipeout of an entire people. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is probably one of the most popular genocides in the entire history of the Bible. It starts with God coming down to visit Abraham at his tent in the plains of Mamre, informing him about his plans to punish the people of Sodom and Gomorrah for their vicious sins. However, since Abraham had a special place in God's heart, he was able to convince him to spare the city if only he could find one righteous man in the city. He did, and his name was Lot, Abraham's nephew. As soon as the 2 angels in charge of the assignment arrived at the gate of Sodom, they found Lot waiting for them. He took them in, fed them, and managed to hide them from the evil people in the city. But then the story took a much darker turn. Immediately, the men of Sodom and Gomorrah found out about the strangers in Lot's house. They surrounded the house, demanding that he release them so they could have sexual relations with them. This, of course, didn't sit well with the angels, and after striking the men with blindness, they forced Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters out of the city. And then the destruction started. Fire and brimstone rained down from heaven, destroying both the city itself and everyone who lived in it. The damage was so severe that the Bible records that even the plants and trees were destroyed, and every single building in the city was razed to the ground. But while everyone left in Sodom and Gomorrah suffered this general punishment, the genocide in Egypt was a bit more specific. For over 400 years, the children of Israel were stuck in Egypt, oppressed, enslaved, and constantly overworked by the Egyptians. And then God found Moses, and the story of their liberation was kick-started. Unfortunately, though, Pharaoh wasn't too happy about freeing over 600,000 men and an unspecified number of women and children just because Moses told him so. So the bloodshed began. First came the plagues, wiping out a large portion of the Egyptian population, destroying their crops and poisoning their water. But still, Pharaoh remained stubborn, so God struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, right down to the firstborn of the prisoner locked up in jail, and even the firstborn of the animals. Somehow, this convinced Pharaoh to finally let the people go, which seemed like the end of the story until he decided he wasn't really done with them just yet. He hopped on his chariot, selected 600 of the best chariots in Egypt, along with the rest of the chariots in the kingdom, and started chasing after the Israelites. After catching up to them while they were crossing the Red Sea, Pharaoh and his army stubbornly tried to follow them across, but the waves crashed on them, killing every single soldier within seconds. Nobody really knows how many people died that day or during the Passover murder spree. However, this next genocide wasn't carried out by God himself. You see, while the children of Israel were on their way back from Egypt, they had to pass through a place called Rephidim, where a tribe known as the Amalekites lived. The Amalekites were descendants of Esau, and obviously they didn't want about 1 million people taking over their lands, so they went to war against the Israelite army, led by Joshua. This was when Moses raised his staff and the Israelites won by a miracle. However, a couple of years later, after Saul became the first king of Israel, God decided to revisit the Amalekite incident. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, God specifically instructed Saul to gather over 220,000 soldiers and attack Amalek, destroying everything they have, killing everyone from the men to the women to the kids and even all their animals. He wasn't supposed to take any prisoners, and God even got mad at him for sparing some of the people and animals. So it's safe to say this was a full-blown massacre, or in other words, a genocide. But years before that, there was a similar situation that was probably even more gory. While the children of Israel were on their way to their promised land, they came face to face with one of the most fiercely protected cities in the region, Jericho. The city was completely shut down behind its high walls. Nobody went out and nobody came in, so there was no way the Israelites could conquer it. That was until God instructed Joshua and his army to march around the city for 7 straight days, blowing their trumpets and shouting until the walls came crashing down. With Jericho now exposed, the soldiers went straight into the city, slaughtering every single person they found. Well, except for Rahab, the woman who helped the spies stake out the city. Men and women, both young and old, were killed mercilessly. And just like with the other cities and kingdoms, the Israelites also butchered every single animal in Jericho. They even burned the city to the ground, only sparing the silver, gold, and brass, which went straight into the treasury of the house of the Lord. This particular one was so bad that Joshua even cursed the land, affirming that anyone who tried to build up the city would lose his firstborn the moment he laid the foundation, and his lastborn whenever the gates went up. That wasn't the only city Joshua conquered, though, because in chapter 8, Joshua talked about how he completely genocided the city of Ai, followed by another massacre in Hazor in chapter 11. Everywhere he stepped in, he and his army murdered everyone and proceeded to burn down the city. Numbers chapter 31 also tells the story of a different massacre, this time commandeered by Moses himself. He was old at this point, and according to the story, this was his last mission before he would be gathered unto his people. As instructed by God, Moses took 1,000 men from every tribe of Israel, armed them to the teeth, and went to war against a tribe called the Midianites. But this wasn't just another war. It was a total slaughter. Every single man in the city was killed, including the 5 kings, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba. However, for some reasons, the Israelites spared the women, children, and livestock this time around, instead taking them as slaves. They also burned down the city and all its castles so no one would be able to live there anymore. Apparently, God was punishing the Midianites for leading the children of Israel into idolatry and sexual sin. But what if I told you the children of Israel were also victims of genocide themselves? Well, they actually did it to themselves. From the 3,000 Israelites slaughtered by the Levites after they got caught worshiping the golden calf, to the thousands of men, women, and children who died in several plagues after they tried to rebel against God. Even in Numbers chapter 15, when Korah led another rebellion against Moses, the ground opened up and swallowed him and about 15,000 of his followers. And when the children of Israel decided they needed another god in Numbers 25, God ordered Moses to kill 24,000 of them. Who could also forget about David's countless massacres, from the slaughter of the Philistines to the genocide that almost wiped out the Moabites, Edomites, and the Ammonites. But do some of these instances really fit the definition of genocide? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.